Welcome to Licensed Poetics, a podcast where we talk about creative storytelling. I'm your host, Fan Ling.
And I'm your host, Achim.
Today we have an extremely special guest in the studio here. You all have already heard her angelic intro music played on a mini harp. And we have the one and the only harp poet, Ying. Welcome.
Thank you for having me.
So blessed to have you here.
Before we get started, just some housekeeping. Please follow us on Instagram at Licensed Poetics. Our listener community is very important to us, and Instagram is a great way to stay connected. And if you'd like to request a book to be reviewed or a topic to be discussed on the podcast, you can reach out to us on Instagram or leave a reply in the Q&A section of this episode. Lots of people don't know about this feature on Spotify, but if you click into an episode and scroll down, you'll see a Q&A box where you can write us a message. Thank you so much for listening, and let's get into today's episode. Achim, would you like to introduce Ying to our listeners?
Yeah. Ying Chen is a spoken word poet and a harpist. Her practice is deeply informed by environmental and social justice issues and her Malaysian Chinese heritage. She uses music and words to make sense of her inner and outer world, sharing in the hope that a listener might hear something that helps with their own journey. Through story and sound, she hopes to activate the inner artist and activist that exists within us all. She has performed at the Art Gallery of New South Wales, Powerhouse Museum, and FBI Radio, and is forever grateful to Bankstown Poetry Slam for helping her find her voice.
Thanks so much for coming, Ying. How do you feel?
Oh my gosh, like I mentioned earlier, it's like you never get used to hearing about yourself in the third person, but I'm honored to be here and it's just really exciting. Thank you for having me.
Okay, let's do our reading updates. I'm really excited to talk about the book I'm going to talk about because it's by George Orwell. And George Orwell is one of my favorite writers, and I don't think I've reviewed him in detail yet on this podcast. So the book is titled Politics and the English Language. It's published as a standalone book, but it really is just an essay published in 1946. Okay, so he's obviously known for his political writings, works like Animal Farm and 1984. And his writing has shaped so much the way I think, and he definitely inspired my passion for political writing. And some of his essays were literally life-changing for me.
Oh.
And I really love this one because when Orwell writes about politics, he's never interested in taking sides or like bashing people or like the hot topics of the day. He's only ever interested in sort of piercing through the dysfunction and getting to the truth. And that's something that I really admire. Okay, so the argument of this book, Politics and the English Language, is that he finds the political writings of his time to be cliche and stale and most of all unclear. And he argues that lazy thinking creates lazy language. And then lazy language, in turn, makes it easier to have lazy and uncritical thought. And it's really interesting because he says that people write in prefabricated phrases that are very overused and doesn't mean anything anymore. Phrases like lay the foundations or achieve a radical transformation. I find that like very hilarious because those phrases remind me of today's corporate speak, right? Like synergy or like disruptive innovator and stuff like that. And I can't take that shit seriously. So I feel very validated when to read Orwell attack that kind of writing. And like he literally quotes other people's work with their names and everything just to completely tear them apart. Like he does not, like those writers are very much his contemporaries and he does not seem to care about offending them at all.
Sounds like something that you would do.
Yeah, honestly, yes. I would like to read out some of my favorite lines of the book to illustrate his main arguments. Here's one. The English language becomes ugly and inaccurate because our thoughts are foolish, and the slovenliness of our language makes it easier for us to have foolish thoughts. Oh, this one, when he talks about those bad writing samples, he's like, the first quality of this writing is staleness of imagery. The other is lack of precision. The writer either has a meaning and cannot express it, or he inadvertently says something else, or he's almost indifferent as to whether his words mean anything or not. Oh, that was so funny, honestly. Oh, I love that. And this is fun. He says prose of his time consists less and less of words chosen for the sake of their meaning and more of phrases tacked together like the sections of a prefabricated henhouse. Oh, he argues that the attraction of this way of writing, where you, I guess, open your mind and let the ready-made phrases think your thoughts for you, that way of writing is easy. And it's easier to say, in my opinion, it's not an unjustifiable assumption than to say, I think.
Can I request finally just use that voice as your like real voice now? Can you just like adapt that voice?
Like when I'm like making fun of. But yeah, I think this is a great book to read if you're interested in political themes and literary criticism, and also just the craft of writing. This is one passage that I really love where he writes, people who write in this manner usually have a general emotional meaning. They dislike one thing and want to express solidarity with another, but they're not interested in the detail of what they're saying. A scrupulous writer, in every sentence, will ask himself at least 4 questions. What am I trying to say? What words will express it? What image or idiom will make it clearer? And is this image fresh enough to have an effect? But you're not obligated to go through all this trouble. You can shirk it by simply throwing your mind open and let the phrases come crowding in. They will construct your sentences for you and even think your thoughts for you.
I love the clarity in the way he constructs a paragraph or a sentence.
Exactly, the clarity. I think clarity is what he's advocating for. And I really admire that. That's the book that I'm going to talk about today. I really loved it. It's a really quick read as well. It's really short. I also read In the Dream House by Carmen Maria Machado this week. I actually finished it already, but I haven't decided what I want to say about it yet, so I'll report back in our next episode.
All right, nice. Thanks for sharing.
What a cliffhanger, though. TBC.
Right, so for my reading update, I'm actually going to talk about 2 books, both poetry collections. And then they have this sort of intricate relationship between the two, to me at least. So first one is Dearly by Margret Atwood. So I think most of our listeners would have read Margret. She is very well known for her fiction writing, her novels, but a lesser known side of her that she started off as a poet, and then this poetry collection is one of her earliest works. So while she was still young, she was like in the uni sort of age, and then she went through her old drawers and then managed to collate all these early poems of hers. And it did offer like a really fresh take on her personality, on her topics that were like she was interested at that time. I'm going to share like this is one particular poem that really haunts me, particularly because I was also listening to Sandman, the audiobook.
By Neil Gaiman?
By Neil Gaiman. And then this just seems to work really well. Fireworks, 2 streets over. Something's burning somewhere, or did burn once. A torn silk veil, a yellowing letter. I'm dying here. Love on a skewer, a heart in flames. We breathe you in, thin smoke. Grief in the form of ashes. Yesterday the children smashed their hollowed eggs on the heads of others, baptizing them with glitter. Shell fragments litter the park, like wings of crushed butterflies, like sand, like confetti, azure, sunset, blood, your colors.
That is beautiful.
It's just like really sort of haunting imagery that I'm looking for. And then in this noir setting, it just matches really well with the aesthetics of said Sandman. Yeah. So this is something I really enjoyed reading this whole collection, is that it feels really tender and sincere. And it's also with like these bold imageries. So overall, like really good read.
There's a nice link to what the Orwell's, what was it, the 4 questions, what image will make this fresh or something? Because
What am I trying to say? How can I say it shorter? What image or idiom will make it clearer?
I think that's a great example, because the imagery of love on a skewer and grief as ashes.
And it's fresh. Like no one actually uses them.
Yeah, I mean, I had to like stop thinking about kebabs.
That was my fault initially.
Once I moved past the kebab association, I was like, okay, love is on a skewer. Like,
I think that the poem was talking about ways that it's almost like an incarnation, like a reincarnation. Like souls, they sort of still exist, like they linger in this plane. Basically, like they can be found on everyday objects.
Yeah, imagery needs to be fresh enough to have an effect.
Yeah.
So that you don't just gloss over it when you read it.
Yep.
And also the second one, it's The Flame by Leonard Cohen. I actually picked this one up from Shakespeare & Co. in Paris.
Oh my gosh.
It feels really special when I checked out and they put it in stamp. They even asked me, do you want a stamp? I was like, of course.
Is that even a question?
Is that even a question? And then the stamp says Shakespeare & Company, 0 kilometer, Paris.
0 kilometer?
Yeah.
What does that mean?
Yeah.
It means like you're right here.
Oh.
Like your distance to the bookshop is 0 kilometer.
Do they have like a branch or that's like 3,000 kilometers from their Paris headquarters or something?
It's like you put in the destination on Google Map and then it says measures the distance.
You have arrived.
Yeah. Leonard Cohen is like really well known for his songs. So it's like that's like my association with the earlier book that I mentioned. It's also like a lesser well known face of the author. And then I'm really obsessed. I think the most famous ones are Hallelujah, What Happens to the Heart. Like these were like really poetic and then almost like a chant, and has a religious theme to it. So it just opens up with what happens to the heart. And then it's because you've listened to it as a song, and then now it's written on pages. It's something that feels different. And then I believe he also changed the lyrics to either to adjust to the rhythm, or he just changed it. I don't know.
Did he write the poems first and turn into music, or the other way around?
I believe it started off as a poem.
Okay.
And then later on he just put it into also like the way that he sings the songs is like almost like reciting a poem. Yeah. So the way that he writes, it's I believe it also like it's very fitting for this persistent rain in Sydney. So it just feels really like warm and sultry and sweet. And especially if you sort of like when I was reading it, I was reading it with his voice in my head, and then his like double bass, really deep voice, and then you read it next to a fireplace while you are just a tiny bit tipsy.
Ideally from mulled wine.
Yeah, and that's the vibe. So it gives like this really comforting, invigorating energy.
Yeah. I'm curious, can you, because Leonard Cohen is a musician, can you sense that in the poetry? Like if you didn't, let's say if you didn't know that Leonard Cohen was a musician, I'm just curious when you read.
Oh, that's a great point.
Because
Ying is such a poet and
that's
musician
right.
as well.
I picked this book particularly for that reason as well.
Makes sense to that.
So I'm gonna actually read like a few lines from What Happens to the Heart. I was always working steady, but I never called it art. I was funding my depression, meeting Jesus, reading Marx. Sure, it failed my little fire, but it's bright, the dying spark. Go tell the young Messiah what happens to the heart. It has like a song rhythm to it. And also, I believe like he only sings like what happens to the heart. Like the other lines, they were basically read. Yeah. And this one just like just immediately made me plunge and then fell in love with. And then it is so good, so much so that it kind of makes the rest of the poem a little bit bland. It's
but
like
you need that key line.
Yeah. No. I mean, what I'm saying is that like this first poem, it's so good.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, like it kind of makes the rest of the book a little bit bland, but it just says like how good it is. I think it's also kind of risky that you put one of your best works from like at the very beginning. But yeah, I just basically because I have way too high of an expectation. But yeah, overall it's really good. Definitely something that would be too much if you golf it down in one go. Yeah, I think just take it slowly so you don't like intoxicate yourself too much.
Go
I
slow.
love that idea of getting drunk.
Yeah.
On words.
Yeah.
That's actually a really nice segue to me mentioning a book that I've been reading for a long time, because I think you put it really well, Achim. Like, it's just, there's so much wisdom and like what I would call, it sounds weird, unstructuring of the self that happens when you read this book, that I have been reading it over years. And most recently I haven't revisited it in like a few months because I'm still trying to process some of the stuff I've read. So the book is Women Who Run with the Wolves.
No. Oh my God, you're kidding.
I am not kidding.
A previous guest mentioned it. Melina mentioned it in episode 10.
Yes.
There we go.
Women Who Run, but she was reading the Spanish version.
Oh.
I believe the English was the original version.
Actually, that's what I'm curious. I'm wondering whether she wrote it, Clarissa, Pinkola, Estés wrote it in Spanish verse or English. Yeah. But regardless, like, it is just so beautifully written. It is so poetic, and seriously, like, I've got like my pencil with me and I'm just like underlining entire pages. So I need to find a new system.
Good mood. I do that too sometimes.
Yeah.
Oh, you and Melina would have such a lovely conversation.
Should have come 2 episodes earlier.
Oh, that was beautiful.
Thank you, Ying, and thank you, the Reverie harp is not yet named.
Actually, that's a perfect thing to talk about to open our discussion. Can you tell us how you name your instruments and what instruments do you play?
Oh my gosh, that is a great question. It's for so I play the harp, the piano, and the violin. Although,
oh my God, I didn't know you played the violin.
Well, it's because it's a bit neglected at the moment. So yeah, poor violin's neglected. Definitely nameless at the moment.
Okay.
Actually, naming instruments is a bit of a new pursuit of mine. I've actually never don't feel a strong need to name them, but it's just been fun because the story of how how my other harp was named was just because I was speaking to someone. They were like, what's her name? And I was like, oh my gosh, she doesn't have a name. And she was like to me, oh my gosh, you've been spending all this time with her and you haven't given her a name? That's appalling.
I love that you're spending time with an instrument.
Yeah,
that's beautiful.
Yeah.
No, and you really are.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think it was actually that conversation that made me think, okay, like there's so much power in a name. Think of him, you've said to me before that a name is like a spell.
Yeah.
And our names have so much power over us. I've definitely had such a journey with my name. So yeah, I kind of think it's just kind of like a fun thing to think about, like what is the identity of the instrument and does it bring forth like a word that you want to call it?
So what's the name of your harp, if you want to share?
Andrea, after Andrea Gibson. Because this the person I was speaking to, she was like, oh, who's your favorite poet at the moment? I had to add at the moment because I was like, I've got too many favorite poets.
Course.
I was like, look, at the moment, I'm obsessed with Andrea Gibson. And she was like, okay, your harp's called Andrea. And I was like, yeah.
I think
beautiful name.
Andrea would be really pleased to hear that.
Oh, that's
you
such an
tell them
honor.
No, I haven't told them. Just imagine like the DM on Insta. Just like, hey, Andrea, I'm a massive fan and my harp is now named after you.
That is
That's
not
so cute.
I know, that's not the worst DM that you can
worst
receive.
DM I could send.
But yeah, I really appreciate the artistry in naming something that you spend so much time with. It's like, especially musical instrument to a musician, it's like you imbue your energy into it so much so that it's only reasonable that you give it a name and then like personifies it a little bit.
Yeah, and I would say it's definitely two-way. I think you imbue your energy into the instrument and definitely the instrument is giving you that energy to like...
You're creating together.
Yeah.
It's like your creative companion.
Yeah.
So I've been thinking about this a lot because after our conversation is that I think in modern day society, we human beings, we are losing this particular interaction. So back in the days, we have horses. Yeah, it's like our most loyal companion. It's almost like a familia. We would name our horses, of course, and we would spend days. We used to name our like trucks. But now people, like everyone has a car, and like everyone has more than one car even. So that's no longer special, and we stopped naming them.
One exception, my family, we have named both our family cars, but I think that's probably really weird and not normal. But I take your general point.
That's cute.
Yeah.
But people are still naming their people have been naming their boats. And
that is a big thing.
The cruises.
Yeah.
Is it like a luxury item? Is that why they name them? But then a horse is also a luxury.
The yachts, yeah. So I was spending some time off and I was just kayaking.
Thought you were gonna say you were on a yacht.
No, I was near yachts, right? Yeah. I was kayaking.
Did you name your kayak? That's cool.
No, I just rent a kayak.
Oh, okay.
It would be rude for me to name them. But yeah, I was just kayaking in the middle of a sea of yachts. And then I just I got so curious and then I started to record every yacht's name that I found interesting.
That's cool.
Yeah. And I was gonna rate them.
The names?
Oh, you totally should.
Yeah. I was gonna do like a series of ratings on the names. But yeah.
So what are some of the interesting names that you saw?
I think some of them are like really edgy, like heavy metal, like Blue Death, stuff like that.
Yeah.
And some of them are like more sci-fi, like Stella, XX21 or something like that.
That sounds like how Elon Musk names his babies.
That's right. Yeah, that's right. But yeah, I just really appreciate the naming. I think there is power, there is art, just in the action of naming itself.
And again, I keep linking everything back to those 4 questions from George Orwell about, I've been thinking a lot about naming more generally, like for example, when I'm able to name like an emotion, like what I'm feeling, I feel so much better, even if it's not a positive emotion. And I think to sort of link it to writing, it's that satisfaction of like naming something to know it
name it into existence.
Yeah, into
before
existence.
before you name it, it doesn't really exist. And then like once you give something a name, like you know it, and then it exists to you. In fact, my other favorite writer, Milan Kundera,
oh my gosh,
he talks about how language is censored in his home country, and then a result of that censorship was that things were blurring into a nameless reality. Is when we don't talk about something, that thing loses its name, and then people forget that it even exists.
Yeah.
Should we talk about your poetry next, Ying?
Oh, yeah.
So you got started at BPS, is that right?
Yes. It was really BPS really is where things really kicked off. But actually, I think it all kind of kicked off with a matter of what you could say is luck. Who knows? Is it fate? Depends what you believe in. But it all started when I was at my first job out of uni at a commercial law firm, which feels like another life. And I just happened to end up in the same grad team, same rotation as Sarah Mansour of Bankstown Poetry Slam.
Wow.
It was crazy because there were only 3 grads in that tiny team. We were in commercial real estate. So obscure. And then I meet Sarah, and I just think it must have been meant to me. That must have been why we suffered.
The meeting of the century.
The meeting of the century, the meeting of the lifetime. So it was really her, because at that point I was really like not happy about the fact that I'd ended up in that setting at a commercial law firm. I don't think it was me. I'd kind of ended up there for a few reasons, like out of fear of the unknown and thinking, well, this is certainty, at least for now. Let's just do this because I'm too scared to think about what I really want to do. And I think I had been like, not really attending to my creative, like my inner artist for a long time by then. So I met Sarah, and then we would just talk about everything. We'd eat licorice, and like we'd talk about
eat licorice.
Yes, I know.
Oh my God, Ying.
The key takeaway is that I really like licorice.
I feel betrayed.
I'll just see myself out now.
And Sarah ate it too. Oh my God.
That was one of our key bonding moments.
Wow.
But
I know what we're missing in our friendship.
Yeah, the licorice.
I need to get my hands on it.
Unbelievable.
But she really, she would, we'd talk about all sorts of beautiful topics, and she really encouraged me to write. So I started writing back then kind of like as an escape. I remember I had like my diary, and every now and then at work I'd just like stop what I was doing and like write a line, like a creative line.
Oh my God, amazing.
Because all I'd been doing is writing like, section 51A of the,
legalese.
all this legalese. So it was kind of a way to stay sane. And then, I think that sort of planted the seed. And then come lockdown, when Bankstown Poetry Slam did what they called Slamtember. It was
Slam what, sorry?
Slamtember. So it was in the month of September, in that big, long lockdown in 2021. I don't even know anymore.
Wait, when you met Sarah, has she already started BPS?
Yeah, she had already started BPS.
Okay, I see. Sorry, go back to...
No, all good. So I think it was really during lockdown that I started writing more consistently in response to Slamtember, because they released a writing prompt every day. And you could, it was really
That's
cool.
such a meaningful thing to do during the lockdown, to be honest.
It really kept me sane. And then through that, I guess I just realized like I can't stop writing now. So just keep writing.
Oh, I love that. You can't stop. That's how I feel,
it's like
to be honest.
you're infected with this virus of creative energy.
The best kind, much better than COVID.
Yeah, exactly.
I wish I'd have known BPS and then
in lockdown.
Made my life so much more better.
I mean, I hadn't met either of you by that point, so I couldn't have told you either. So
That's so cool. So what kind of slam poetry do you normally perform for our listeners who might not be familiar with your work?
I think it might help to sort of go back to why I'm so drawn to spoken word poetry in particular. It's because when I first started going to poetry slams, I just remember I would go to them and I would be just so amazed at first of all, the democracy of the open mic.
Absolutely.
It's incredible. I think I've been thinking about how, and maybe this exists, I wish there were open mics in every form of creative expression, like dance, music, everything, that kind of format. Because I was just amazed at everyone's voices, just to put it really simply, and the rawness of their storytelling and their vulnerability, and just feeling so connected to someone in that moment and feeling like you had this portal into their soul for a moment. So I just really loved spoken word poetry for that power, the immediacy, the directness, the fact that normally you'll make different decisions about crafting your language for it to be able to be processed on the spot by your audience. Which I think for me really helps demystify poetry.
I love that demystify.
Yeah. I think what I love about slam poetry is that it does tend to be a bit more direct and
accessible.
More accessible. And it doesn't mean it's any less deep or beautiful. I think, I just really, really admired that. And I would leave these slams buzzing and I wouldn't be able to sleep until like 3 a.m. because I would just be like, oh my gosh,
so pumped.
Like, so pumped with all that energy and creativity. And then I would find that I would just start writing too because it helped me realize that my voice was important as well. That all our voices were important. So I feel like I've forgotten what the question is, but
What are the themes that you tend to write about?
Oh, okay. Thank you. I think as a result, I think it made me, I think prior to that moment, I hadn't realized the power of I think it's strange, right? It's like a double standard. I would openly listen to other people and place so much value in their voice and their stories, you know. I'd be actively listening and I would seek out those stories. But when it came to my own voice, it's strange. I kind of thought, well, you know, I'm different. Like my voice isn't as important. My story isn't as important. So I think going to slams kind of helped me realize that my voice was important. And as a result, I started to write a lot about my own experience as opposed to other things, you know, other topics that I would tend to intellectualize. So as a result, I wrote a lot about my own culture and identity and heritage because growing up, I struggled so much with being Malaysian Chinese growing up in Australia.
And did you grow up in the eastern suburbs as well?
No, I didn't. I grew up in the northwest.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Right.
But yeah, experienced like heaps of casual racism and racism growing up. So had a lot to grapple with and like not feeling, you know, neither here nor there. So yeah, a lot of it was I think a process of like reclaiming myself when I realized that.
Reclamation.
Yes, reclamation. Yes. Favorite word at the moment.
But yeah, I can definitely relate to what you were saying about after listening to all these different voices performing, it really encourages you to write as well. I came back from one BPS session and I wrote like one of my poems the other day, like the next day while I'm at work.
Yes.
Hide it from my boss.
I feel like I can say this since I've quit this job, but I wrote quite a bit of poetry at work. Because when inspiration strikes, you just gotta capitalize on it.
Right. Yeah.
I love what you said earlier about demystifying the process. I think that's really important. And while I didn't discover slam during lockdown, I did discover a lot of shorter poems. And I also got started in poetry. You might not know that. But I think poetry, especially it's just shorter. Sometimes it's just a few lines on the page and it makes writing so much less scary. Because if you read like a brilliant novel like 1984, you might just... It's just completely unattainable, you know? Like, when are you ever going to write something like that? Yeah. Whereas poetry, of course, it's like highly crafted and artistic, but it is shorter and it can be a lot more accessible. And I just love that. I think that's so valuable.
Yeah, I've been thinking a lot about what a poem actually is. And I've been listening to a lot of Patrick O'Tuama. Yeah, and then one of the favorite things that he said is poetry is an issue of invitation. It invites you to identify whatever it is in the poem. Like it can be the narrator, it can be the person or the environment, the being that the narrator is interacting with. But also to me, it's almost like if I were to take it a step forward, it's almost like a seduction.
Oh,
yeah. So like I'm seducing you to take a peekaboo into this slice of my life. It can be ever so tiny and then insignificant, but it can at the same time be evocative. It can be inspiring.
I would love to talk about musicality with you, Ying.
Oh, I would love to talk about that too.
Because Ying has performed slam where she plays the harp and recite poetry at the same time. So how incredible is that? I mean, so what was your process of creating a piece like that?
Oh my gosh. Okay, the first thing I would say is coordination. I've always had, I've got respect for like all creators, but like especially when I see musicians who are like singing while they play, which is very common. But I always think, because I'm a musician too, I think, oh gosh, that would be so difficult. Like it's already, hard enough to play the music.
Yeah.
And then you add in a whole nother element.
I find that incredible too.
Yeah.
Even though it's so common, like
it's
incredible.
It's on a different dimension.
It's just like crazy. It takes so much. I think, mastery and comfort of your instrument to be able to add that in. So yeah, I remember when I thought of doing this harp poet thing, playing the harp and reciting my poems, I thought, I don't even know if I can like physically pull it off in terms of like the coordination, but I thought, look, I'll just give it a go. So I guess
mic on the left, harp on the right.
What if we use our brain to the fullest?
Oh my gosh, yeah, it is a full-on mental, emotional, workout. So I guess my process was, I think I first started with, I'm like, where to start answering this? I think in general, I promise this is relevant. The reason why I love spoken word poetry so much is because it is music, in the sense that,
that's right.
Yeah, like you think about the elements of music, right? Pitch, intonation, dynamic, tone, timbre. All of that comes into play with your voice, because your voice is an instrument. And when you're speaking, like what I think the performances that kind of always affect me the most are the ones where they've really skillfully used things like, dynamic and silence.
Absolutely.
And, like
I completely agree. Like the performances that stand out to me the most are the ones that borrow elements of music, live music. Yeah.
And it's been thought about, I don't know, like sometimes it could be intentional, sometimes it could just be natural because it suits what they're saying. But I've just always thought of spoken word poetry as music. So I think when I write a poem for the stage as opposed to the page, I'm thinking a lot about those elements of music and how I might, use them. And I think as a result, when it comes to setting a poem to music, it kind of just already has been set up in that way, because I've already thought about some of those elements of music. So I guess in putting that show together, I thought about if there were certain poems where the music would actually add a kind of symbolic element. I didn't want to just do it for the sake of it. If a poem, is a poem and I was just chucking some music at the back, I didn't want it to not add to the poem.
Okay. Yeah, you want it to work together.
It has to work together. I think in music theory, you would call this like programmatic music. Programmatic music is where you... I didn't actually think about this when I was doing
I love the technical term. Love it.
But programmatic music is where music is trying to depict something. For example, Nigel Westlake, incredible Australian composer, Antarctica. He composed a score called Antarctica, and that's programmatic because it's meant to depict the sparse, icy,
so
desolate.
Like a specific imagery attached to it. Okay.
So that's programmatic music. And that's what I wanted the music to do for my poetry.
Wow.
It couldn't just be like, just for the sake of having some nice chords in the back. It had to be its own actor in a way. So to give an example, what's the first one I did? Oh, I have a poem called Permission, which I just wrote I wrote it in response to a few things, but I just kind of wrote it and didn't really think much about what I'd do with it. But when it came to setting music, I thought it would be a really good one to set to music because the poem is all about, I think the first line is, I'm always waiting for permission. And I thought, okay, I can probably compose some sort of musical motif that is really repetitive to sort of like symbolize the act of waiting.
Ooh.
It's just going to repeat and repeat. It's just going to loop on itself and it's not going to go anywhere. It's not going to resolve in a musical sense.
Yeah.
So you're just you're going to be suspended as a listener, waiting for that loop to resolve. But it never does until in the poem I like move to the point where I talk about, giving myself that permission. That's when
it resolves.
That's when it resolves,
Wow,
and then
so
the
beautiful.
musical accompaniment takes off, and is, I guess, quite. I wanted, when I composed that, to make it really joyous and kind of almost like to feel like I was flying when I was playing it. So yeah, I kind of that's, to give an example, is how I approached pulling together the music and the poems for that show. It was very deliberate.
Wow.
Do you normally write a lot of music, or is it just to accompany your spoken word?
Yeah, it's a good question. I improvise a lot. Like one of my favorite things to do is just to sit at my instrument and just like play whatever I feel like. So, and something I really want to work on is actually approaching that more formally and actually taking those ideas somewhere. I usually find myself stopping at really weird places, like in the middle of a busy train station, whipping out my phone like Google Docs app to like catch like a phrase that's come into my head. It's the same with music.
Musical
That's
phrase
right,
or word phrase?
Actually both.
Yeah.
Sometimes, if you ever see like someone singing into their phone, that's me.
Wow.
I'll be like out and say it's either words or it's a musical phrase. I'll be like, I'll just like get out my voice recording app on my phone and be like,
that's awesome.
That's so cool. I do that all the time, but only with words.
Yeah, but it's a very similar concept, and that's why I think I just think like all creative expression it's coming from the same source. It's just about what mode.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
You feel called to express it through. So
yeah. So recently we attended Ying's poetry workshop. Yeah, on the theme of environmental poetry. Yeah, it was just such a graceful experience. Yeah. I'd like to hear more from like your curator point of view. Yeah, like picking your poems, and then just maybe to the listeners that are less familiar with like the nature poetry in general.
Yeah, I'll just talk about what the workshop was like, because it was beautiful and I was there. So it's in Nurraginji Reserve. I'm probably saying that wrong. Yeah, I don't know how to say it or spell it, but it's a beautiful nature reserve in Blacktown.
Yep, in Doonside.
Doonside, yeah. It was my first time there. And then Climate Riders, created by Marlene, our previous guest, an LP alumni, and Izu Tan, collaborated with Ying to create this nature poetry workshop on this beautiful reserve. So they set up lots of picnic blankets and people came in from all over and we all sat together, and Ying was the facilitator. She gave us wonderful handouts with selections of nature related poetry that she curated, and we all followed various prompts to try to create a few lines or a poem of our own that's related to nature. I have a really funny story, but I'll share it after Ying. I think you know what I'm going to talk about. But Ying, please tell us your experience facilitating that workshop.
Yeah, well, I just really wanted to share what I had learned and gained from writing about nature and the environment in my own work. Because I have a lot of eco-anxiety. Like I get really stressed about environmental issues.
When did that start in your life, if you remember?
I don't. I think I've always loved like the environment and wanted to protect it. But I think in terms of becoming a more active citizen, probably only in the last few years, especially when I made a really deliberate decision in my job at the time to leave that job and find a job that was in the environmental sustainability sector, because I thought, you know what, like I'm sitting here at work 8+ hours a day. Why don't I go and do something that I feel is extra meaningful to me? And that would be doing something in the environmental space and using my policy skills there. So I guess it maybe really started in terms of action a few years ago. And I just found that writing about nature really helped, first of all, heal my own anxiety. Like I could find a way to process it and to name, give words to, give form to what I was feeling.
Yeah, that's excellent.
And the thing that really moved me was the fact that when I shared these poems, the response of people who heard the poems blew my mind. Because they would, to give an example, this was really pivotal for me. I have a poem about the Cooks River called?
What pollutes our minds.
Yeah. That's the
I
one.
remember that
Yeah.
piece.
Yeah,
It's
so I
beautiful.
think that piece, thank you, really showed me the power of writing about nature. And writing about anything really. I think it's just to come back to the general power of poetry and connecting people when you can express something. So yeah, the response to that poem really moved me. And I thought, okay, there's a power here in writing about these themes, infusing it with a bit of hope as well, so that it's not all doom and gloom. And yeah, just
The workshop?
the workshop. Yes, I'm so easily distracted.
No worries.
So yeah, when it came to the workshop, I thought, okay, I just want to share that experience with people. And I think especially in the handout of nature poems that I compiled for attendees to take away, I really wanted to show people all the different ways that you can, I don't want to say use nature in your poetry. That sounds
Pay
funny.
attention.
It sounds like, yes.
Ways to
thank
pay
you.
attention.
Ways
Yeah.
to pay attention to nature. Saying using nature is like very much what I don't want to do, because that's what we're doing as a human race, like capitalizing and over extracting. But yeah, ways to pay attention to nature. Like whether it's just purely to write in praise of nature, because I think that's really important too, to just show up for what is beautiful and be able to spend time making space for that beauty in your own minds and others. Also, I guess like thinking about how nature can help reveal things about yourself and humanity more broadly. So that relationship between humans and nature.
Mary Oliver.
Mary Oliver.
Oh my God, I'm going through
Yes.
such a Mary Oliver phase right
Yes.
now. Like, oh,
If you had something to name, it would be Mary right now.
Yes.
Like-
I'm gonna name, I don't know, my computer. Like,
Yeah.
all of my instruments are so unromantic. You know what? I'm gonna name my rolling pin Mary Oliver. Hey, that's a very important tool to me. I love my rolling
I
pin.
love that. Oh my gosh. I can't wait to like see what you create with
Yeah. I'm gonna make some delicious scones later today
Okay.
using Mary.
you can
my
cut
rolling
this out
pin.
because it might be too cringe, but Mary Rolliver.
Whoa. I love that.
Mary Rolliver, the rolling.
The roller.
She's Mary now. I
Oh
love
my
her very
gosh.
much. Mary Oliver, if the listeners don't know, she's a American poet who is known for her nature writing.
Yeah.
If you don't know Mary Oliver, just exit the podcast right now.
to go and
To
look
look
up
it
Mary
up,
Oliver
yes.
poems and then to return.
Like I'm so jaded and cynical, and I used to think Mary Oliver would do nothing for me. I could not be more wrong.
How would you know that one day your rolling pin would be named after her?
Exactly.
Yeah, Mary Oliver, I think to tie back to earlier themes, I think she's a great example of, I guess, direct and accessible
yeah.
poetry. Her language is often like really simple, and that's something that I've been learning on my creative journey as well, in music as well, that I think when you're trained in something like theoretically or classically or whatever
Yeah,
it
especially
is,
as a classically trained musician.
that sort of training can often, I don't know, lead you to assume that for something to be great, it has to be complex.
Yeah, or like technically sophisticated.
Yeah.
Or whatever, yeah.
But the more that I explore, the more I realize, like in my music and my writing, that actually the simpler the better.
Yeah.
So, and I think that's something Mary Oliver does incredibly well.
Less is more.
Yeah.
Less is more, yeah. All right, should I tell the funny story now?
Yes.
So it was a beautiful nature writing poetry, right? So I went there. I enjoyed every minute of it. And when I tried to write on my phone, I wrote a poem featuring a rifle and shooting. And then even as I was typing it out, I felt like I just like really hate myself because I was totally just doing what you were saying earlier, using nature to convey an idea that I wanted to convey. Not super proud of that idea. Not sure if I will continue working on it, but it was just this very funny story that I showed up to a nature poetry workshop and wrote a poem about rifles.
Can I say though, even though we would just say earlier like semantics, or like we don't want to be using nature in that way, but no, I think it's really valid to be, it's images that a lot of people can relate to
Yeah.
will always be I guess, a really good vehicle, a really good starting point for making a fresh image. So using nature in that way, I think, isn't necessarily a bad thing. And I think
No,
often is
not at all.
something that poems do really well. So
Yeah, so I was going to write about the silence of the trees
yeah.
versus the loudness of the little creatures like the bees and the birds. And there's something in there about the silent majority versus the loud few. And when, you know, the loud few, can they really claim to speak for the silent majority? So I was trying to write about that, but then like the first image that came to mind was going to a forest with a rifle and shooting all of the loud things so I can hear the silence of the trees.
No,
Anyway.
If you ever do write that, please let me know.
But yeah, I actually wrote something nature themed recently while I was in Adelaide. Yeah, so I spent a long time just by the lake and then playing with this like admiring these two beautiful black swans.
Ooh.
They were just they're like just chilling on the lawn under the sun, and then it's just like carefree, nonchalant. And I think they appreciate that people are just staring at them, admiring them. It's just such a cute scene. And then, yeah, I came back and then I started working on this poem, sort of inspired by my experience when I was scuba diving.
Ooh.
So, yeah.
I would love to read that too.
Yeah, a lot of pressure in that poem.
Pressure? Oh, like
Yeah,
water pressure.
Pun intended.
Yeah.
I actually want to make an announcement. Yeah, so this is actually going to be my last time recording for Licensed Poetics. Oh.
I feel like I need like the harp to cry.
Yeah.
Like,
Do you want?
You need like a sad
I don't
music.
think it can sound sad when it's tuned in this tuning, but crying.
Oh. So thank you so much for your feedback, for your active engagement. But yeah, keep supporting LP, keep supporting Funlin, and then our future guests, and then hope you enjoy it.
Oh, thank you so much, Achim.
Yeah, it's been such a pleasure. I had so much fun.
Yeah, Achim made a incredibly significant contribution to LP. You actually don't know this, Ying, but he brought in the idea of having a guest on every episode. And without it, the podcast would look completely different today, and it wouldn't be what it is today. I just want to wish you best of luck in all of your future writing projects and also other creative projects.
Thanks so much.
And you'll always be like the founder of Licensed Poet.
Oh,
yeah.
That's so sweet.
And I feel really lucky to have managed to catch you before this era ends. So
that's it for today's episode of Licensed Poetics, and thank you so much for listening. I'm your host Achim.
And I'm your host Fanling. Thank you so much, Ying.
Thank you for having me.
Whoa.
We had so much fun. We'll see you in our next episode.
See you.
Bye. We'll see you in our next episode.
See you.
Bye. Say bye, Ying.
Oh, bye.